Joe Bluen, thanks very much indeed for joining us. Welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me, Peter, and greetings to your viewers at home.
So, Joe, a little bit later today, South Africa presents its oral arguments in its case at the ICJ. How significant is this case?
It's a very, very significant case, and it's a significant case for several reasons. The first, I think, is there's a symbolic significance. We know that the Genocide Convention, under which South Africa has brought this case, was approved by the United Nations General Assembly, accepted in 1948. Which is the same year in which apartheid was established, both in South Africa and in Israel. So we're having this culmination of legal architectures where I can't think of another context in which we're seeing allegations of genocide, but not only allegations of genocide within the context of apartheid. So that's the one aspect of significance. The other is that South Africa has reminded the world of the jus cogens character of genocide, right? That it is an obligation not just to not commit genocide, but to act immediately when we see it happening. So I think that is very significant. And I think, I always say that law is both a kind of a legal field, a legal space, but also a symbolic space. So if we think of this as part of a set of tools that is being, the law is not a solution. Very few, I think, would think that the law itself alone is a solution. It is up to us what we do with it. But having it in that light, it is supremely significant that now, before the principal judicial organ of the United Nations, the International Court of Justice, that was established in the aftermath of the Second World War, is now seeing a case of genocide against Israel for its actions in Gaza.
I wonder if anything like this has been brought before the ICJ in the past.
So we've had, I think it depends how we talk about anything like this, right? So I think one of the things that I think is quite interesting about the ICJ is that it has handled cases, and we know about the ICC. I'm sure many of your viewers are familiar with the extreme anti-African and anti-Black racism that affects the ICC and the kind of white supremacist geopolitics of that. The ICJ, on the other hand, has had a history, which is quite impressive, of ruling in favor of those fighting against colonial domination. So we saw quite recently in Mauritius, Mauritius took the United Kingdom to the ICJ for the incomplete decolonization of the Chagos Islands. We saw that was a successful case. In the 70s, and I think with South Africa's apartheid occupation of Namibia, we saw a series of cases there where the court again ruled against apartheid South Africa. So it has a certain lineage, I would say, of who's to say what the outcome will be, and I'm smart enough not to make predictions. But I do think the South African government's legal team has put together a phenomenal case. And in this regard, I think it is deeply significant and part of a history of maneuvering within colonial international law to support anti-colonial ends.
We'll talk about South Africa's case just now. I am curious also what the ICJ's adjudication of this case might mean for other conflicts where the United Nations, UN Security Council, has either been unable or unwilling to take action.
think it's such a great question, Peter. Thank you for that. And I think one of the things that that we need to know about the Genocide Convention is that it's an interesting convention in that it imposes, as I kind of briefly referenced earlier, not only does it say that genocide is unlawful and lay out what genocide is, but it also imposes a duty on all signatories to the convention to prevent genocide and stop genocide whenever they see it happening. So this is a tool that can be used. And now what we also know is that any state that is a signatory to the convention can bring a case. So I think you make a really interesting point there that this is, and again emphasizing that the law is not the answer, but this is a mechanism that can be used, and especially when we consider across the African continent as well, how these conflicts are interconnected, who's funding these conflicts, who's providing weaponry. You look at the AFRICOM bases, the kind of proliferation of US militarism, very similar military patterns to what we see in Palestine. So I think it's significant in saying that the law, and I'm immensely enthusiastic about this case, and it's not the end, it's the beginning. What we're hoping for is an end to this genocide, but it is part of a set of tools that can be used to hold power to account.
So it is a genocide case in the context of what's happening in Gaza. What will South Africa be presenting? What is the evidence to support this case?
So let me say that South Africa has it's an 84-page document, and it is meticulous. It is a meticulous text that whatever happens will be an archival record of the horrors. It details, I'm not going to go into the details because I'm sure your viewers will know, but the kinds of, so I think there's two components. Number one is the absolute horror and devastation of this genocidal onslaught in Gaza. So it details the people killed, the children killed, the bombing of hospitals, schools, etc., etc. And very, very carefully and very, very legally meticulously reads these against one of the threshold requirements of the Genocide Convention, which is genocidal intent. So in actual fact, hypothetically, you could have a genocide where no one was actually killed. But if there is genocidal intent, that is a key component and a key element of the legal framework for genocide. So in addition to using media, human rights reports from Palestinian groups, in showing the evidence of the absolute destruction of Gaza, it also shows these statements of genocidal intent from Israeli officials, right? So, we know that the Minister of Defense described Palestinians as human animals. We know that they have called for the eradication of the entirety of Gaza. And so once you start using this language, and genocide studies scholars talk about these levels of escalation, where you start comparing people to animals, for example. Once you're doing this, you're clearing the grounds for that. So they have very carefully tabulated and registered not only the destruction, but the intent to eradicate an entire population, and shown that this cannot be done with impunity, that there will be accountability for this in the legal stage, but also in the world stage.
Israel will be presenting its case on Friday, and they've been saying that this case by South Africa is nothing but blood libel. And they're saying that all they're doing is defending themselves. How do you respond to that?
With a deep breath. So, I mean, I think let's talk about blood libel for a second. So I think let's be very clear on one thing. Judaism is not Zionism, and Israel is not Jewishness. Zionism is a fairly recent phenomenon in Jewish history. The idea of Israel's having a homeland, Jewish people having a state territory is a very new phenomenon. And one of the things that the Israeli state has done is maliciously and really dangerously misinterpreted the Bible and misinterpreted histories of Jewish persecution as part of a willful desire to promote racism and to promote anti-Palestinian racism and to promote genocide. So, for example, when the Bible says the children of Israel, what biblical scholars will tell you, this is not the children of contemporary Israel as we know it, right? It means the people. So they've maliciously and done a really dangerous thing there. Now, blood libel, and I must say, and I say this as someone who is descended of ancestors who went through generations of anti-Semitic persecution. And one of the tropes is the idea of blood libel, which was this predominantly white Christian European myth, a rumor that was spread about Jewish people. And it was used to justify the persecution and mass murder of Jewish people. So the Israeli government accusing South Africa of this, number one, is a complete misrepresentation of what blood libel is. Number two is an absolute disrespect for our ancestors who actually died through the blood libel conspiracies, and shows how Israel relies on the maintenance of anti-Semitism for its sustenance alongside other forms of racism. And number three is really indicative of the fact that they have very little legal standing and are resorting to using Jewish history to doing terrible things with our history in the support of an apartheid genocidal regime. Now, if you've been through genocide, as many Jews understand, why would you dishonor those who have lived and died through this evil blood libel myth? So it's an absolute indication that they have no ground to stand on. And I will add to that, as I'm sure your viewers are aware, the Israeli government sent out cables to all of its embassies, urging them to discredit the case using lies such as this. So we have to understand this is not a mistake. This is not they have a very organized propaganda machine. It's called Hasbara in Hebrew, and it's deeply well funded, and it is to support the upholding of the Zionist state. It is not about Jews. It is not about anti-Semitism. It is about Israel and its settler colonial apartheid occupation and the support of that by many, many in the West.
We're running out of time, but perhaps one big question. You belong to this organization, South African Jews for Free Palestine. And there seems to be a bit of confusion out there about this being a Jew-Arab war. And there's a conflation of Zionism and Judaism. Walk me through this, because it's clear to me that not all Jews support what Israel's doing, and that Israel's using the Jewish name to do what it does.
I don't know what I must walk you through, because you've put it so well. And one of the things we say is not in our name. I will tell you, I wish for a day where I don't have to say that I am Jewish and therefore my voice matters in a particular way. because Zionism is anti-Semitic as well. And if you look at kind of there's many different forms of Zionism, but one of the main things was Europeans did not want to have the so-called Jewish problem. So Europeans said, what happens if we just dump them somewhere else? And there was talks of Uganda, there was talks of other parts of the world, and it ended up in occupied Palestine. And there's this idea, a land of no people for a people of no land, which of course we know is not true. There's been centuries of Palestinians there. Now, Jews are diasporic people. We have not been tied to a state historically. And the idea that Zionism is Judaism, that belief in the state of Israel is Judaism, is nothing short of a really malicious plan to partake in global racism and genocidal anti-Palestinian racism. It is a settler colonial project. It is not, and our faith is being vandalized in support of this. And so as South African Jews for a Free Palestine, we recognize that Israel is a fascist state, it is a settler colonial state. Many of us understand fascism very well. We have understood South African fascism in the shape of apartheid. We've understood various forms of European fascisms in the pogroms and the Nazi Holocaust, and we know this is fascism too. So we absolutely refuse this conflation, and it's manipulative, and we don't buy it, and we say not in our name.
Jo Bluen from South African Jews for Free Palestine. Thank you so, so much indeed for your time and your insights.
Thank you for having me. Greetings.